Welcome in the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for finding us on your favorite podcast app, whether that is iTunes or Podbean or Spotify, which is on both platforms. We're also on Dash Radio. Download the Dash Radio app for free. Search for Nothing But Net. We're there every day at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm also on OnSideRadio.com every day. That's the new locally owned radio station here in South Florida, the only sports radio station locally owned. They're every day from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. That actually will be expanding soon, and we cover more than just the Miami Heat, although we do cover the Miami Heat there as well. Also, 5reasonsports.com, our free website, 5reasonsports.com. We do not have a paywall. Again, we cover all the South Florida teams. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. So many of our sponsors are local, and they're big Miami sports fans. That includes our friend Mark Brown. This is a real estate litigation and transaction law firm, both commercial and residential, with a full-service attorney-owned title company. And Mark Brown, PA, there's a $295 closing fee on all refinances and purchases when mentioning 5 Reasons. That's the deal. Mention 5 Reasons, $295 on the closing fee on all refinances and purchases. They handle evictions for both landlords and tenants, and they offer flat fee evictions. Practicing for nearly 15 years here in South Florida. You can reach an email, Mark, M-A-R-C, at marcbrownpa.com, or call the office at 954-566-5678. Again, that's 954-566-5678, marcbrownpa.com. Mention 5 Reasons, $295 on the closing fee. And now, today's episode.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5
on the floor.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily show on the Miami Heat and the NBA featuring Ethan Skolnick with Alex Toledo and Greg Sylvander, part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Ethan Skolnick back on 5 on the Floor here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Today's floor plan is pretty simple. We're going to give the floor to the voice of the Miami Heat, Eric Reid. He has been on the podcast with us before. It feels like forever ago. It actually was about a year and a half ago. He was on prior to the 1920 season doing some predictions. He had a lot of things right. He had Bam's growth. He had Jimmy fitting in great with the Miami Heat in terms of the culture. He had Kendrick Nunn and Tyler Hero making big impressions in their rookie seasons. But I will say this, Eric, you missed on a couple of big things. 1, you did not predict COVID. 2, you did not predict the bubble. 3, you did not predict Bam's block against Boston, and you did not predict Jimmy Butler having 2 of the greatest games of all time. How did you miss on all of those things? You're the voice of the Heat. You've been there since the beginning. You're supposed to be clairvoyant.
Yeah, nobody saw an Eastern Conference championship that fast for this group either. So there was a lot of unpredictable things about last year and just as many this year. But I think what is pretty predictable is a very wide open and competitive group of teams in the East. The Heat are one of those teams. And I'm excited about the season ahead, Ethan. I think the Heat have a very deep and a very good basketball team. And even with all the continuity, they still have their share of questions going in with a very short preseason and an even shorter training camp ramp up, preseason to start this year. So it's going to be fun, though, and we're ready to jump into it.
All right, so let's jump into it, and we are going to get into some of those predictions and some of the things that you see going into 2021, which obviously starts just in a couple of days as we're recording this. Obviously the first game up in Orlando, and then the second game here, Christmas Day against New Orleans at 12 o'clock at the arena. But I want to get into the broadcasting side of this with you first, because you had that unusual experience in the bubble where you were doing it from the arena. Now this year, the arena is open. I will be there. I'm going to be credentialed. I'm going to go to a bunch of the games at home and maybe a few on the road. But it is going to be very, very different with no fans. Is this closer, though, in some ways to what you're accustomed to?
It's a step in the right direction, Ethan, with teams, at least the teams traveling from city to city. The games at home will at least be in front of us. But it is still very unusual. I mean, in the bubble, we did all the games from our courtside location at the American Airlines Arena. And I can't tell you how surreal and sort of unique that experience was, driving into an empty parking garage, walking through a vacant building, looking at all the empty seats. but the weirdness went away as soon as the game started. And there we were doing games off, two 75-inch TV monitors in front of us. And the minute the game started, I was just so honed in and attached to the action. And in one way, only TV aficionados will appreciate this. But when you're doing a game live, in normal times, I almost equate it to driving, where the court is my road. So I'm spending most of my time looking at the court in front of me, but the TV monitors are like your side view and rear view mirrors. You're constantly checking because that's what the viewer's actually seeing. So it's a delicate balance of monitoring both, Ethan. But during the restart in the bubble, all we saw was the same feed everybody was enjoying on television, and it simplified the task in that way. Well, now we fast forward to this year. No broadcaster is traveling this year in the league, and no broadcaster is any longer sitting courtside. So our broadcast location is elevated. That's fine. We still have a great view of the game. I think what makes it odd and different is that we're distanced from our own product. We're not going to be traveling with the team this year. So that really cuts down on your interaction with your own team, your own colleagues, your colleagues around the league, the different broadcasters and coaches and players in each city that you would run across. Also, even going down to the floor, before the first preseason game at home, I see Goran Butler warming up some of our players. Goran and I have a long, close relationship. I wasn't able to go down to the court and have a conversation with him like I normally would. But having said all that, again, when the game begins, it's business as usual. Now, for road games, we'll either be at our arena or at the Fox studio in Fort Lauderdale. For the second preseason game against Toronto that was played in Tampa, we actually broadcast the game from Miami off a 12-inch TV monitor. Now, I would have never thought that would have been workable or doable until you got to work that way and do it that way. And it was fine. And as all broadcasters around the league, we're going to adapt and evolve and make it work. And more than anything else, Ethan, really just attach to the game and enjoy watching basketball with Heat Nation, something we've been able to do, fortunately, going on 33 years. So when it gets down to basics, your passionate connection to the game is what carries you over some, unusual moments like we've had the last couple of seasons.
And Eric, that's one of the things that struck me about the bubble season, and something that honestly surprised me a little bit, is that the passion that the Heat fans, particularly the people I deal with on social media and through our platforms like YouTube and this podcast, their connection to that team was incredibly strong throughout the bubble. And I think those memories will live as long as the memories that lived for the games that the fans have been able to attend. And that surprised me a lot, because it's a television product now. I mean, you can't go, at least until the Heat are able to open up the arena. I know Eric Woolworth is optimistic about that, but we don't know when that's going to be, and it's not going to be until 2021 for sure. And there is that connection. I mean, even if, people who went to the Dolphin game this past Sunday, it's just a different experience for when the majority of people are not consuming it that way. They're not living the Ray Allen shot in person. They're seeing it on TV. This fan base really connected with this team in a way that was like visceral, even though they couldn't be there to watch it. I mean, I went to a few of the bubble games. People didn't want me going because every time I went, something bad happened. But I was up there, way up there, and it's not the same experience for a media member. Like you said, it's not the same experience for a broadcaster, certainly not the same experience for a fan who basically is relying upon you or whoever it is that's calling the game when it was a national game, instead of being able to go to the arena, get a hot dog, get the popcorn, get their beer, and sit there and experience it in person. I was surprised the connection developed to the point that it did.
I think, Ethan, for the fans that attend games, so important to the lifeblood of every professional sports organization. But when you think about it, they're the minority. 20,000 people get to go to a game, and maybe hundreds of thousands are watching that game on TV. So listen, everybody's missing the involvement of the fan at games. But as a TV product, I think it's remained, sort of unblemished in all sports. You watch the NFL right now. Yeah, you can't go to crowd shots. You notice it, but I don't think it detracts from the telecast or from enjoying whatever sport it is that you're in taking. I think that, the Heat fan base is very strong and very loyal. And when you're winning, that just adds to it. So, going through the restart, things picked up. People weren't used to watching basketball in August. And then all of a sudden the playoffs begin and it gets riveting. And you see a Milwaukee series that goes 5 intense games like that. Even the Indiana sweep, every game came down to the last couple possessions. They were very competitive games for the most part. But I just found that, the memories, the moments, they were connecting. And I remember, once we get past the first round in the playoffs, we don't do games anymore on local TV. But John Crotty and I, this year we did I've done, these sort of fake calls that the Heat record for years since the Heat have been in the playoffs. This past year, John Crotty joined me on these quote unquote fake telecasts. And I told John, I said, you'll be amazed at how it connects you to the game and in the way you're most accustomed to. And we treat those games like they're real. And the Heat may pull a soundbite out of them, or 2 or 3 or 5. It doesn't matter. I don't connect to it like that. I connect to it like I'm just doing the game live. And I'll never forget, game 1 against Boston in the conference finals where Bam blocks Tatum's dunk that would have, forced another overtime. And this, we're doing it, on a fake broadcast that nobody's actually listening to. And when Bam blocks that shot in an empty building, by the way, and I jumped out of my seat making that call with great passion and enthusiasm. And I remember looking at Crotty as he's looking at me, and I could just see the look in his eye, like he's thinking like, this guy's out of his mind, like this isn't even a real broadcast. And I drove home that night, and I drove home in such a thankful manner, Ethan, that, 32 years in to my Heat career, over 40 plus years of doing basketball for somebody, that the game still moves me and reaches me like that. And that's why I'm in it. And that's why I still enjoy it all these years later. So I think I'm not alone. There's a lot of folks that connect and get great enjoyment out of watching pro sports and out of watching the Miami Heat. And I imagine that will be the case again once this season begins.
All right, we'll get to those predictions in a second, but I do want to look back with you one last time before we get to a break, and then we do that. We talked a lot previously about favorite Heat teams, and we even did a podcast here on 5 on the Floor where we tried to find our top 5, and it's hard to omit the championship teams, obviously, because that's what you're striving for. That's what this organization has always said that they're about. And there were those 3 runs, obviously 06, 12, and 13. And then there were other runs to the finals. But then we mixed in other teams that didn't win championships, the 03, 04 team, the so-called Road Warriors teams of the late 90s, even though they didn't pay off in a title, and 3 times didn't even pay off in getting past the Knicks. Now that you have had some time to reflect, and it hasn't been that long, it's been less than 3 months, not even, maybe 2 months, since this finals run, where does this team fit for you? This last team, 1920.
I think I would say one of my favorite teams, one of my favorite seasons. It was so surprising with the twists and turns that it took. The regular season before the March 11th shutdown was entertaining in its own right. As it came together, and then it got unplugged. You didn't know if it would get restarted or not. I don't think I've ever been prouder. Listen, I've been so proud to work for the Heat and to work in the NBA from the day it began for me in October 1988, but never prouder than I was this summer to work in a league and for a team that showed what they did, in Orlando. And the 2 things that I think they showed was, number one, without fans in the building, I thought those games and those teams were played so hard and were so focused. The games were competitive and compelling, and I thought the product was really outstanding, all things considered. And the other thing factored into it was the social messaging, both the things on players' jerseys, Black Lives Matter on the court, people not shying away from issues and from statements, and from really meaningful moments outside of basketball. And they didn't run away from Black Lives Matter. They didn't hide from that. And I was proud to be a part of that as well with some messaging that we did on one of the telecasts, why Black Lives Matter so much to me. It became personal. So all of those things combined made it a unique season. But then you wind up going all the way to an NBA championship. And I think, Ethan, in a strange but real way, this became maybe the most popular Heat team ever from people outside of Miami. The whole country, I think when we had our greatest teams here with the big three, we were sort of looked at as the evil empire. It was the Heatles here, and we were sort of hated everywhere else. The team people loved to come and boo, the team that everybody just wanted to beat. But this past year, they were such a team, and there was no one standout star, although Jimmy Butler certainly emerged as that in the NBA Finals. But I just thought it was as cohesive and collective an effort as we've seen in 32 years of Heat basketball. And I think the whole country gravitated to it and appreciated it. And you had more Heat fans out there nationally than maybe ever before. So I hope that carries over. I know it will with the team. I don't think there's a greater motivator than making it to the finals the year before and losing. Now, it hasn't worked out for the last two teams that's happened to. Cleveland a few years ago, Golden State as well, didn't make the playoffs the year after losing in the NBA Finals. But I don't think that's going to be an issue for this year's Heat team. I think they got a great chance to get back. And I think that they're in for what should be another terrific season.
Yeah, no doubt. And those two teams were such strange circumstances because LeBron leaves one and the other one, Curry, gets hurt. And so, with this one, at least knock on something, they came into camp in good shape and they made a couple of changes that look like at worst they'll be lateral moves and obviously have added Precious in the draft. All right, when we come back, we're going to get into some of what may happen with this team. We're going to allow Eric to make his predictions. We will not force him to predict another global pandemic. Right back. We'll get back to our episode in a second, but before we do, I want to tell you about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. This is our friend Mark over at U-Break Wheel Fix. This is in North Miami. I visited him down there. It's a great facility. You should go check it out yourself. U-Break Wheel Fix is a wheel repair and refinishing company located in North Miami with 15 years of experience. They fix bent or cracked wheels that are damaged on the streets of South Florida. They got fast turnaround times on most repairs. They even offer the loaner wheels when you fix or refinish your wheels so you can keep your car on the road without interruption. If your wheels are faded or peeling, U-Break Wheel Fix offers complete refinishing back to factory standards. If you're bored with the look of your wheels, U-Break Wheel Fix offers over 5,000 different finishes to customize the look of those wheels, including the Vice colors. Don't spend money on new wheels when you can renew them at U-Break Wheel Fix. They offer a full line of custom wheels and tires for every vehicle application. They offer in-house repair and complete vehicle customization. So call U-Break Wheel Fix today, 305-748-0112, 305-748-0112, or check them out online, U-Break Wheel Fix, that's W-H-E-E-L, fix.com. You can find them on Google, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Yelp. I recommend Instagram because you can check out everything that they do there. Also, you mentioned 5 Reasons. We always got a deal for you. Mention 5 Reasons Sports when you call. You receive 15% off anything. Any of their services, mention 5 Reasons, 15% off. And now, back to today's episode. All right, Ethan Skolnick back on 5 on the Floor with Eric Reid, the voice of the Miami Heat. Been there since the beginning. We're talking to Tony Fiorentino about the originals, and he is one of the 6 originals that is still with the team. All right, let's get into some predictions for this season, or at least, you don't have to predict numbers or anything like that. Last year, Bam Adebayo basically predicted his stat line. He gave it to Dwayne Wade, and it ended up being what it was. But I want to start here with him. What, in your view, is the next stage of growth for Bam after we saw in his first year as a starter? He makes an all-star team. He wins a skills competition. He's in the running for Defensive Player of the Year and Most Improved Player. What is the next stage of evolution for Bam?
I don't know, Ethan. We're gonna find out, though. I think one of the things is an intangible. It's his leadership and the mantle of that leadership, from Udonis to him, sharing it with Jimmy Butler. I think you're going to see more of that from Bam Adebayo. I think you're going to clearly see his offensive game continue to grow. And he's going to do the other things at a very high level too, rebound and defend and initiate and play make and set screens and roll to the basket. I think he's going to have a little bit more help, which looks like a very deep front court alongside of him. But I just think you're going to see his offensive game expand. You're going to see more of a mid-range game to him. I don't think Bam needs to go out and start making threes, but he's going to make more 15 to 16 footers. I can guarantee you that. And but yet he's proven he doesn't need to score a lot to mean a lot in terms of Miami winning games. And as long that's going to continue. Listen, he got paid. He deserved it, but I don't think his focus is going to change. And that's why he was, I think, such a great investment for Miami. He's only 23. Spo calls him no ceiling for a reason. I think he's one of the winning, most coachable players that we've ever run across. And I think not only is he probably the most important player on the team right now, but I think he's an incredible asset as when you talk about free agency and recruiting magnets and tools at the Heat's disposal. Bam's right near the top of the list there.
Yeah, what stuck out to me in the first preseason game was when he got on the floor for a loose ball. I think it led to a layup or an easy one, maybe a dunk for Duncan Robinson. And it's just like, that's how your max player, your center should play. And, I don't want to disparage anybody else, but I'm just saying not everybody does that. You get the max contract. You're not always on the floor in a preseason game to get a loose ball to set up your teammate. And to me, not that I had any doubts, but when I saw that, I'm like, okay, he's still Bam. I did have one more question on him because you've seen all the great bigs for the Heat, whether it was, the guys that grew here organically or the ones that they picked up like a Shaq or a Bosh. I know everybody's unique. Obviously, Udonis, has a special place here. Bam is carving out his own niche in a lot of ways, but he's a homegrown talent in the sense that he's probably already the second best draft pick in Miami Heat history. I mean, Glenn Rice would be up there as well, although a lot of that didn't really happen until Glenn was gone. He didn't become an all-star until he was gone. Where do you see, where can Bam, I mean, you mentioned no ceiling. Our guy, Greg Sylvander, has been calling him no ceiling for a while as well. Like, where do you see this ending for him? Like, I mean, can he be a better pro ultimately than Chris Bosh was? Where does it?
I don't know. That's what the rest of his career is for. Where does it end? With a banner, hanging from the rafters one day. Hopefully, a couple of championships, in his bio. But it's really still just beginning. I mean, the guy's only 23 years old, and he's already a seasoned veteran pro who really only is concerned about winning. He's a coach's dream. He's a teammate dream. And I think it was really important what Miami did with him. That's how you treat your best player. That's how you treat a guy that's going to carry your culture into the next decade. It not only sends the right message to him, it sends the right message to his teammates and the rest of the league. You do the things he does, you do get taken care of by your team. So I was very happy with the move to tie him up. And when you can invest that kind of money and lock up a guy for another 5 years, and he's only 23, I think that's win-win for everybody. The scary thing with free agency is when you're paying guys near 30 and and at the end of the contract, you're talking about 33, 34, 35-year-old guys. That's where it's riskier. I think with Bam, it was a no-brainer. So I look for another step, in what could be one of the great careers that we as Heat people get a chance to witness over these 3 decades of Miami Heat basketball.
Well, you mentioned it can be a little scary when you go get a free agent that age, and the Heat did that last offseason. They went and got a guy in Jimmy Butler. There were some questions about how he would fit in a program like this. Looking back, those questions seem a little bit ridiculous. But there was also legitimate questions about age, about where he would be at the end of his deal. And then we just saw at the end of one of the most grueling seasons in NBA history, him have 2 of the greatest performances that we've ever seen in NBA Finals. Before we get into what is here for Jimmy this year, I'm going to put you on the spot because I put Tony on the spot when I had him on. To me, there are 3 performances, and you would know better than I because you were there for all of them, but there were 3 performances that stand out in Heat history. And actually, when I tweeted this out, one of the guys involved in one of those performances agreed with this list of 3. So if Dwayne says it, I'll go with it. But basically, Game 3 in Dallas against the Mavericks, down 2-0 in 06, Dwayne Wade. LeBron James in Boston, 2012, Game 6 backs against the wall. They're going to break up the whole damn team. Maybe Chris Bosh just traded. LeBron comes out with 45 and 15 in that type of setting to win when nobody else is really giving anything offensively. And then the Butler performances, you could pick either of the two. I think the second was better than the first, but I think you could go with either of them.
Yeah.
How do you rank them? How do you rank them, Eric?
Well, he had 40, 13 assists, 11 rebounds in game 3. And then he goes 35 points, 12 boards, 11 assists, 5 steals, and 47 minutes in game 5 in the 2 Heat victories. 2 of the great finals triple doubles we have ever seen. Spo's great quote about that's what a champion looks like before he's a champion, when Jimmy was just physically and emotionally exhausted, but still grinding away. Epic, just epic. And playoff Jimmy was unlike any other version of Jimmy that the world has ever seen. And he doesn't have to start the season like that this year, and he won't. But knowing he can get to that and seeing what kind of teammate he was, and it wasn't just to the young guys. I mean, look at the bond he created with Dragic. They've become, it's become a legendary sort of iconic relationship between 2 of your better veteran players. And if Goran and Bam don't get injured in game 1 of the finals, it's not an excuse or a fallback. I mean, that would have been, it went 6 games anyway. That could have been a very different championship series. But, Butler was great with his veteran teammates. He was even better with his young teammates, infusing confidence, not afraid to show tough love. He's brutally honest. And I think, listen, right time, right place for Jimmy Butler and Miami. You're getting a mature man, a player that has matured greatly over his 10 years in the NBA, or 9 previous years. And he's found himself surrounded by like-minded individuals in an organization that reflects his, win it all every game right now mentality. And I think that's what he was always looking for. And that's why the fit is so seamless. And I think we're all looking forward to year 2 of Jimmy in Miami. He makes you one of the better defensive teams and one of the more competitive teams in the NBA just by his presence.
All right, but I'm putting you on the spot here before we go to break. How do you rank them?
I'm not going to rank them. I mean, listen, all 3 of those. I would guess that I would rank them like this: Wade 1, Butler 2, and then LeBron 3. And LeBron's performance, is better than a 3rd ranking there, but just by the virtue that it wasn't in the finals, I'm going to put it at number 3. But those are 3 of the legendary, epic playoff performances that Heat Nation has had the privilege to witness.
And look, there are others. Zoe's game 6 in Dallas in 06, I think just for that short stint could be up there. And obviously there are other great performances. I remember Hardaway, finishing the Knicks with 38. I mean, there are many over the course of time. But those 3, to me, those are like the A+++, right? That considering the stakes, and I'm with you that LeBron's probably 3rd because it wasn't in the finals, but the stakes were significant. They were significant because you were talking about potentially the end of the Big 3 era before it really ever got officially started.
And
right?
doing it on the road in a place where you don't win often, doing it in that building against that proud sort of championship caliber team in Boston. I mean, it was truly a moment. One of the, other than game 6 in Dallas, that's got to be the best road win in Heat history.
Yeah, no doubt. And people are going to come at me with Ray Allen's shot, and no question. You're talking about one singular play. It maybe in NBA history, it's Ray Allen's shot. But when you're talking about a performance over the course of the game, to me, those are the 3. All right, we'll be right back, and then we're going to get into the young players, and then we're going to let Eric go. We'll get back to Eric Reid in a second, but before we do, I want to tell you about the hottest new daily fantasy game. Saw a bunch of signups come in last week, so obviously some people are starting to listen to us. Unfortunately, I lost at the end when Patrick Mahomes kneeled down, but there is always another game, and there are always other games, other players that you can play, again, whether it's You can do MLB when MLB season starts, NFL, college football, or of course, we're going to be doing a lot of this for NBA. And of course, that's prizepicks.com, where you simply select 2 or 3, 4 players, predict if they'll go over or under their fantasy projection. They also got promos all throughout the week. We post that on Twitter. A lot of our guys in the network are playing it. For instance, like with Jimmy Butler, do you think he's going to go over 25 points? You go over with him, then you pair him with some other player. Say, are they going to go under their rebounds, above their rebounds? You can play just about anybody on any team. So go to prizepicks.com, use the code 5, that's FIVE, that's the code 5, FIVE, prizepicks.com. Use that code, you get a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100, so some free money to play with. Prize Picks, truly daily fantasy simplified. And now, back to today's episode. All right, right back on 5 on the floor. Now, last year before the season, you talked about Tyler Hero, but you also talked a lot about Kendrick Nunn. And I think at the point that we spoke about him, I don't think a lot of Heat fans really knew what was coming. And then he was a starter. He was second in Rookie of the Year voting. Of course, it didn't go as well for him in the bubble. But I want to put all these guys together for you, Hero, Robinson, and Nunn, because we saw tremendous contributions. Obviously, you've been with the Heat all this time, and it's not always been the case that rookies or young players have gotten a chance like they got a chance with this team last year, and that they flourished like they flourished. What do you want to see from these 3 guys, Hero, Robinson, and Nunn, and what is the upside for the 3 of them?
Well, first of all, I think it's one of the real special things about this year's Heat team, much like last. It's an excellent group of playoff seasoned veterans. I mean, Butler, Dragic, Andre Iguodala, those are the 3 that come to mind. And Jimmy Butler, of course. Now these young guys got finals experience. You can't buy that. The value that gives you, what these young players and what all the Heat players went through last year. But I love the mix of veterans showing the way for a very impressive young core that continues to rise. I'm going to talk about those 3, and then there's a couple others that are starting to emerge through this year's preseason. But here's the disadvantage as we look ahead. Didn't get to watch a summer league, didn't get to see players work out in September, or a 3-week, 6-game preseason reduced to, a 2-week, 2-game preseason. And now it's no wonder Eric Spoelstra said he put more into the practice sessions where they did a lot of 5-on-5 scrimmaging than the 2 preseason games. So we got to see Kendrick Nunn and Hero. I called them milk and cookies when I saw them in the summer league backcourt together, and it did transfer over. So listen, Duncan Robinson, the surprise guy last year. Nobody, had him in the starting line. Shane Battier was the first guy that I heard mention that, over a year ago when we were wondering who was going to start for the Heat. And he was clairvoyant, and he had company, in that Heat basketball side of seeing what was ahead for Duncan Robinson, who now comes back as one of the game's great perimeter shooters. So I would think he'll pick up where he left off. It's going to be even more challenging for him as it got last year because he's on everybody's scouting report. And how many nights did we see the best opposition defender on him, which is a tremendous compliment to him. And while that may quiet him at times, it opens up opportunities for others. But he's developing counters. He's great at moving without the basketball. Outstanding. That's why he's in such great shape to be able to run in half court through screens like he does. He's tireless. I think his off the dribble game is going to be a little bit better to enable him to do some other things. And he's got some excellent teammates around him. I think Tyler Hero, listen, he was good in the regular season, then got unplugged with that February 3rd or February 5th ankle injury that cost him considerable time. He came back a better and different player in the bubble. He was incredible in the playoffs. He started 5 games in the finals. He was great in the conference finals. And I think he's ready to pick up where he left off. He's going to be a better defender this year. He's going to be a better playmaker this year. And I think you're going to see a versatility and a varied menu in his offense. It's not just going to be 3-point shots. And we've seen him go to the basket well in the preseason. Kendrick Nunn, listen, I love the kid. I love his story. He's in a fight for minutes to stay in the rotation with the addition of Avery Bradley. You got 5 Heat guards, all capable and worthy of minutes, and they're all not going to get consistent minutes. But I love his competitive nature. He's a skilled offensive player who's working on his defense. But I'm not sure what's ahead this year for Kendrick. But it's a great situation to have these guys with the experience they got last year and all hungry and ready for more. And guess what, Ethan? I don't want to jump ahead of any of your questions, but with Precious Achiuwa and KZ Okpala this year, I think those two guys are going to be the two young players that emerge in the Heat vocabulary and vernacular this year. And I'm expecting good things from both of those players.
Yeah, no doubt. And I want to get to them next. So let's dive into that a little bit. You know, I think that what KZ showed the other night in the second preseason game is kind of what we've been hearing about for a while. You know, that this was there, that he was working on all of this in the G League, but it was kind of out of sight, out of mind. And so it was kind of like rumors, and a lot of, it's like the myth of KZ has been built up on social media. But then you see it in person, in that second preseason game, and you see not only the athleticism and the defensive ability and the ball handling, but also the three-point shooting, which is not necessarily something that, we thought was going to be foremost in his game at the very start. I'm trying to temper expectations with him a little bit, but I feel like with what Hero did and Nunn did and Robinson did, and Robinson was essentially a rookie last year, what they did in their first real live game action, like, it's hard to temper expectations for what KZ could potentially become here, and maybe even how much he contributes this season.
Well, Ethan, he's the mystery guest this year, because think about it, from even in his first summer league, after the Heat thought enough of him, they gave up 2 future second-round picks to get him. Then he comes to summer league and has an injury and doesn't participate. He winds up only playing in 20 G League games. He did show some potential there. He only played 5 games in a Heat uniform last year, and you just didn't see an awful lot other than the potential versatility he had as a defender, the way he moves his feet, his size, and his instincts. But from what we heard and what we were told by Heat coaches, he really made progress in Orlando in the bubble before he got sidetracked there. And he continued that development in this 7-week offseason. And then the other night against Toronto, I think the whole world got to see what the Heat saw in him all along. He goes 6 of 10 from 3, had a lot of great looks on the corner 3, which whoever's playing that 4 spot for Miami, you saw it for Jay Crowder last year after his acquisition, and you're going to see it for who's ever at the 4 spot this year. They're going to be open looks at the corner 3. So the fact that he can go 6 for 10, the fact that he's got a handle to his game now, and he can score. But listen, it's his defense and his athletic ability, his ability to rebound. But in that game the other night, we saw him defend Siakam, we saw him defend Kyle Lowry, we saw him defend Fred VanVleet, and it just jumped off the screen at you. And listen, it's unlocked the door for him. I think, what we saw the other night against Toronto is something that Eric Spoelstra and the staff, they're seeing it, every day in practice. And what they're seeing, I think, opened him up for the kind of minutes that he's gotten in the 2 preseason games. Now, I think it's the most interesting question of the preseason. Who is going to be the opening night starter at the 4 spot? Mm-hmm. That's the one vacancy with Jay Crowder gone. And Spo could go in so many different directions. You got Mo Harkless, you got Kelly Olynyk, you've got Myers Leonard as sort of a knowns, but then there's Precious Achiuwa and there's KZ Okpala, and I think both of those guys are in the running for minutes. Would I be surprised? A little bit. I would not be shocked if Okpala is the opening night starter at that spot. Remember, you're going to have to match up with Vucevic and Aaron Gordon opening night in Orlando. So how you match up defensively with those two guys, Bam's going to be on one of them. Who's going to be on the other? I think Okpala threw his hat into the ring, whether it's starting, whether it's just rotation minutes. I think he's a factor, and it's a surprise because most people were not counting on that. But KZ, with nobody watching, has been putting in a lot of very useful work, and the kid is scratching at something a lot bigger. And I think Achiuwa, listen, he's been hurt by the fact that there was no summer league, that there was a shorter preseason. But when you can go out in your second professional game and get 13 points and 15 rebounds in a little over 20 minutes, I think as the season goes on, he's going to become a dynamic component for Miami. That spot, if you can defend and give Miami rebounds, I mean, if Miami is a better rebounding team, Miami's going to be a better team. It's what hurt them in the finals. It looked like a potential flaw in that preseason opener against New Orleans, where the Pelicans pounded Miami on the glass. But with Okpala and Achua playing well in the second game, Miami pounded Toronto on the glass. So I think those two guys, as this season progresses, are going to be more and more positive factor for Miami.
Yeah, it's amazing. You talk about a finals team, and we're talking about two, 20-year-olds who essentially could play a big role, but that's sort of the development system that they've created here, and it's very different from what we've seen before. I want to close with one player who I don't think sometimes has gotten enough attention over the course of his Heat career, but I think that he earned sort of a different place in Heat history with what happened in the bubble, and that's Goran Dragic. I think if you could look back now and say 6 or 5 years ago when you make that trade, and obviously everybody knows, you trade for Goran that day, Chris Bosh goes to the hospital with the blood clots. You never really got to see it the way you wanted to see it. And then Goran had to kind of fight through with some teams that were not as competitive as maybe some Heat teams have been. He obviously had that 30-11 run with 7-11 and all that. But I feel like he elevated himself in Heat. Like his approval rating with Heat fans is off the charts at this point. And now we see he's back. Like when he hurt himself, I was told 2 to 3 month injury, and he's back. It's less than 2 months, and he played in the second preseason game. Where, in your view, you've seen them all now, where in your view does Goran Dragic fit in Heat history?
Well, I think he's one of the most respected players we've ever had, and this is going to be his 7th year in a Heat uniform. And I think sort of underappreciated for most of that time in Miami, and now really valued and respected as he has earned. He's always been a great teammate. He's a team guy, plays hard, takes the game personal, and has a very complete game. He's a very good player. But what he did, last year, I think endeared him in a way that will never go away here in South Florida. The first thing he did, accept that role coming off the bench, and he became one of the league's best sixth men. And in a league of egos, he was able to subjugate his and do what was best for the team. And then when Spo needed him to start in the playoffs, he was there. 16 of his starts came in the playoffs. He averaged 19 points a game in the playoffs, 21 points a game in the conference finals, where he was outstanding. And, it was one of the most heartbreaking moments that I can remember for a Miami Heat team, to see him go down with that foot injury in the first game of the NBA finals. It sort of, you felt your stomach and your heart just drop into the same abyss when that happened. And missing him for games 2, 3, 4, and 5, it was painful for him, and I think it was painful for Heat Nation to watch games without him. But his courageous and heroic comeback in Game 6, and it's not what he did in Game 6, it's just the fact that he played injured and just wanted to be out there for his team. The last endearing act of a season of endearing acts for him, and plus his relationship with Jimmy Butler, and just having his veteran presence, another special winning warrior veteran that makes his Heat team, so fan worthy. And I think he's super worthy of the attention and the adulation he's received. And listen, he got the Heat into the finals. I know he wants a championship. Maybe he's going to get that opportunity this year, but he's clearly earning the respect over his long career. And now this will be his 7th year in Miami. One of the most beloved and I think respected players we've had here in a long, long time.
All right. We always appreciate it, Eric. We thank you for taking the time and doing this with us. Of course, you'll catch him on the broadcast on Fox Sports Sun all throughout the season. A little bit different. I will wave to you in the arena from somewhere, parts unknown. I'm not exactly sure where they're putting us, but it's good to have you back in there. It's going to be good to be back in there this season. Eric, thanks for taking the time.
Ethan, it's great. Listen, it's a group effort that we're all involved with covering the Heat, but it's almost become like a singular endeavor. You'll see it when you come to games, but it's still we're all blessed to plug ourselves into watching Heat basketball every night and sharing that experience with the great fans of Heat Nation. And we're real happy to be able to do that for a 33rd straight year, Ethan. And we're looking forward to game one right all the way through.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Five on the Floor on the Five Regional Sports Network.